Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Kate and I love books. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to hit that like or subscribe if you're so inclined, it does help as I grow my channel. But let's get into this video. So today's video is going to be a autumn book recommendations. So I have a massive pile of books that I've pulled. So I think I've got different categories. There'll be chapters laid out at the bottom of the video, so if one of them is not your type of genre, you can just go to the next one. So I think we're going to have some classics, like classics to general fiction to dark academia, into some fantasy, and then some YA recommendations. That's the hope. I've got I don't even know how many books I pulled. So we'll see how this goes. So grab yourself a drink and let's get into this. I will say I used to hate autumn. I think I didn't have a great experience, so back to school was never the move. The days are getting shorter. It's just, I used to hate it. However, there's such a vibe with autumn, just like that sort of coziness, the days getting shorter, the back to school, the things that maybe I didn't necessarily enjoy in my youth. I have definitely grown to appreciate the sort of seasonal living, and I think I can very proudly say the weather does not affect my mood the way that it used to. That was a many years pursuit of just getting used to the seasonal living and recognizing that there's a reason for all the different seasons, and it's nice to have a little breakup of your year. The autumn vibe is going to be very much like the dark academia, the Gothic elements, the sort of spooky bits coming in, maybe also some pieces of that nature element and just acceptance of the seasons changing. So let's start with some classics. I only pulled 3 classics and I don't even know if one of them is considered a classic. So the first one is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a classic. I think this is sort of the OG aesthetic of a dark academia, and this follows Dorian Gray, who essentially just indulges in vice and interesting things, and there is a portrait in the attic that reflects his soul rather than his beautiful facade. I'm going to try and go through these really quickly if you can't tell. The next one, I actually read this recently, and that was Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. This is a following of Bathsheba as she establishes life in a small town with different men's attentions and her own sort of feminism and independence, and it's beautiful. I absolutely loved it. It's very much portraying the different seasons in a small rural community of this time, and a scandal, and I loved this. This is my favorite, I think, classic that I've ever read, and this was earlier this year, so I definitely recommend this one. And this one, I'm not quite sure if this is considered a classic because I know it's a more recent publication, but I think it did win the Nobel Prize for Literature, and that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I remember watching the film of this with Keira Knightley and Andrew Garfield and Carey Mulligan when I was maybe 10 or 12, and it absolutely terrified me. So never really had an inclination to go for it again. However, I did decide to face my fears and read the book, and it was incredible. Follows a group of kids growing up as they are raised in a very abnormal situation in a fancy private school, and then following them into adulthood as they discover themselves, discover sexuality, discover love and intimacy, discover the meaning of life, all while there is a very horrific background plot afoot. Stunning. So those are the classics, and I think we'll go into dark academia next. And to start that off is one that is probably considered a classic, and that is of course The Secret History. And this is just a group of classic students in New England who get into all sorts of trouble. The codependent relationships that they build, the horrors that they commit, the psyche and devolvement of their morality and the justification of it just by the pathway of their intelligence. Stunning. I'm not really giving you full wrap-ups. I'm more so giving you the vibes. this is a good vibe. Kind of crazy, kind of crazy. And a similar thread or similar vein to that, this is basically that book in a different font, and that is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And this is almost the same premise, but with Shakespeare students instead of classic students, and it's written more like a script, which is very cool. This is probably easier to read. I would say that The Secret History is a lot more dense in terms of the writing and like a lot more academically written. This one is, yeah, probably just easier to read. So I'd say if you're not sure on The Secret History or it seems a bit too much, this is like the beginner version. Also brilliant. I also loved this one. Another dark academia book that I have is obviously Fable by R.F. Kuang. This follows Robin as he is taken from his homeland in China and groomed to become a language specialist, to go to the specialty college of Babel at Oxford to do some magic work that involves languages. This one is also very intelligently written. It's like a fantasy with the magic element, but it's also very much rooted in the academia and the colonization era of the expansion of the British Empire. Fascinating. And just, oh, the bits that always stick out to me is just the study of etymology and the way that words and language evolved it's fascinating. It's such a cleverly written book, and it's a bit bigger. This is the arc, so I don't know if it changed that much between publications, but also a fab one there. The next one, this isn't necessarily dark academia, and I would potentially put this more in a summer recommendations, but also I barely did summer reading this year. My summer reading was not very summery. I think I read quite a few things that I'm like, oh, this is going to be good for autumn. That is The Idiot by Elif Batuman, and this just follows Selin, who is a student in America. She's the daughter of Turkish immigrants, and she develops relationships within her cohort at school, and then she ends up going on a trip to Hungary, and her emotional journey, I suppose, and it's very, very funny. So I'd probably say this is more of this got absolutely drenched in the water if you can't tell, but this is just a very funny book. Probably I would say more of a like summer recommendation, but it's still got that sort of academia and wit and pretentiousness that we love in the academia, dark academia genre. The next one I've got is a old classic favorite of mine, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. So we follow we follow a young scholar in the Bodleian Oxford Library, and she is the descendant of witches. Her mum and dad were both witches, her aunts are both witches, and she's completely uninterested in that part of her heritage, trying to live a normal life. And then she pulls a magical manuscript accidentally from the depths of the Bodleian Library, and all of a sudden all the creatures within Oxford are now extremely interested in her, including one, Matthew Claremont, who is a nice vampire. This is kind of like, again, it's just extremely intelligently written, but very genteel and fast-paced, addictive, just fascinating. I love this. It's that sort of urban fantasy, dark academia, I would say. And then there's 3 books in this series. I think all the other ones have been standalones. That one is in a series. And then my last dark academia recommendation is actually a collection of short stories, and that is In These Hallowed Halls. So it's edited by Marie O'Regan and Paul Kane, but we have people like Olivia Blake, M.L. Rio, J.T. Ellison contributing. I think there's different stories and contributors here. Oh, we've also got Lane Fargo, who wrote The Favourites. I really enjoyed this. I'm not usually a short stories kind of gal, but this was fun and super just like vibey, atmospheric. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Just little different snippets contributing to the vibe, you know? And there's a little definition of dark academia on the back. So it says, 1, an internet subculture concerned with higher education, the arts and literature, or the idealized version thereof with a focus on the pursuit of knowledge and an exploration of death. Or 2, a set of aesthetic principles, scholarly with a Gothic edge, tweed blazers, vintage cardigans, scuffed loafers, a worn leather satchel full of brooding poetry. Enthusiasts are usually found in museums and darkened libraries. So that's the vibe. Fun. The next one's kind of the transition into fantasy, between the fiction and the fantasy, and that is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I love Adrienne Young. Every book that has been released by her, I end up just gobbling, and this was no exception. So this takes place, I think, on like a Pacific Northwest island off Seattle or off Washington State. And it's kind of got that mystery element. There is magic, there's old town village folklore and sort of that village witch hunt sort of mentality taking place. We follow Emery, and her best friend was found dead, and the love of her life was accused of murdering her. So years later, he returns, and we go from there. Okay, the next is all going into the fantasy genre. I feel like I've recommended a few of these before because to me they're just timeless and they don't matter what season you read them in, and I think you should read them if you haven't already. So the first one's obviously The Invisible Life of Addie LeBrew. Everyone and their mother has heard about this one. I think this is beautiful writing, stunning, just like lyrical prose, and it does follow Addie, who makes a deal with the devil to get out of her marriage and ends up living forever, but no one can remember her after they have seen her. She leaves the room or they blink and they don't remember her, and it's stunning. And then she one day meets, in sort of modern New York, she meets a man called Henry who does remember her, and that's beautiful. The next one is The Bone Season. I think this is a series that takes place quite like, you know how in TV shows it's like every season is a new school year. This one takes place over like a short amount of time, so I believe this one does sort of like establish itself in the autumn, and this is a sort of dystopian fantasy with clairvoyance and a rebellion and revolution, an oppressive government, and it's sort of still got that dark core spookiness and sort of, I think it's probably the clairvoyant element, and it's set in London. We follow Paige Mahoney, and I love this book with my whole heart. The next one I have is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. I almost wanted to save this for winter, but I think this is a sort of, you can do it for both. This is a trilogy that is completed now, and this follows a group of misfits. Gods are forbidden in this world. One of them is a god hunter, god killer. One of them is a disillusioned knight. There's a little girl who has been abandoned, and the only person she has is her little god of white lies who is attached to her, and if anything happens to her, it happens to the god and vice versa. So she approaches the god killer to help solve this case and try and separate them. And the found family in this is just stunning. I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the second book in this trilogy. It was very much like a second book slump, and the bits about this book that I loved so dearly, which was the found family, were not as prevalent in the later books, which is fine, but it's just like, it's a beautiful, beautiful story. The next one I think is a good one for autumn, and that is The North Wind by Alexandria Warwick. I have only read the first book. These are interconnected. It's an interconnected series, I believe. So we've got The North Wind, I think The West Wind is already out, and then The South Wind just came out this year. To me, this is sort of a, like, if you are intrigued by the, oh, what's her name? Like the Scarlet St. Clair sort of romance books that have that fantasy element, but you're not quite in the mood for a spicy fantasy, I feel like this is probably a like in between version of a fantasy book and a fantasy romance. This is kind of like in the middle. It's definitely still like a fantasy romance, but it's not quite as spicy romance as those books. Does that make sense? Because this is also inspired by Beauty and the Beast and the myth of Hades and Persephone's, and it is a little bit more genteel, a little bit more lower stakes, I would say, than typical, but I really enjoyed this. I think it's not one that I'm like rushing to go and get the other ones, but it is one that I think I would like to continue the series, but it's not like a high priority ticket item. But I did think that might be a nice one to throw in here. I'd love to see what you guys, it says, a mortal woman, an ageless god, a union that will save the world or destroy it. And there's lots of elements of that sort of the natural world and seasons and the powers behind it. And it was fun. fun. The next one is a recent read, and this one I was again almost tempted to keep to the winter recommendations, but that is The Poppy War, also by R.F. Kuang. This is a completed trilogy. I've only read the first book so far because I only read it recently. And this is a military fantasy. It is just brutal. That's all I've got to say. This is just brutal. It's a sort of coming of age story as we follow Rin, who has grown up in this particular environment and world of war, and then just sort of the capabilities and what we as humans are capable of, and even there's magic involved in this, but just sort of the detachment and trauma of war. Brutal. I think I was even just about here in the book and I was like, wow, this cannot get any worse. And then it just progressively got even worse and went to levels that I was shocked by. It's very brutal, but very fascinating, very interesting. A classic recommendation by Kate, and that is The Name of the Wind. And this is just a incomplete trilogy. We still don't know when the third book is coming out, and it's been forever. I think it's been over 10 years, and I still don't know when the third book is coming out. Anyways, beautiful writing. This is absolutely stunning, but it follows our main character over the course of 3 days is the premise of the trilogy. So someone asks him to tell his story because he is a famous wizard? I don't know what they call it. Famous wizard. He tells them it will take him 3 days to tell his story. So the first book is the first day of him telling his story. And it's just so beautiful, so stunning. Again, I've recommended that one so many times. And then the last book on my little fantasy list is This Monster of Mine by Shalini Abisekera. I hope I pronounced that right. This is a Canadian author, and I did just read this. I think this will be included in my 24-hour reading vlog coming out later this week. I loved this. I was not anticipating. I think the first chapter I was like, oh, I'm not sure. I loved this. It's a ancient Rome inspired fantasy. So the setting is very fantastical. There's magic. There's just so many elements of a classic fantasy or a fantasy romance. But the vibes were very dark academia because it was sort of set amongst legal proceedings and the establishment of the law and justice, and there's a mentor-mentee relationship. I loved it. Oh, that reminds me. It says it's a series, but I feel like this kind of goes as a standalone and it's maybe set up to be an interconnected series. I'm not really sure where this is going. I think this is a new release, but I loved it. And speaking of the mentor-mentee relationship, I will say just 2 other recommendations that I don't actually have physical copies of, and that is Nocticadia by Kerry Lake and The Exorcism of Fairies by J.L. Vamper. This was one of my favourite books so far this year. I loved this one. Kind of set in Ireland in the 90s, and this is, I think, modern day, but off a random island off of Maine. I love both of these, but I read these on Kindle Unlimited. I think they're both available, so those are also in the mix. Both, again, the sort of fantasy dark academia vibes. How are we doing on time? I can't even tell. And now we move to the final part, the YA section. And I have said I am in my YA era at the moment, but that's okay. First book, The Book Thief. If you haven't read this, this is a book that I think everyone needs to read in their lifetime. It is told from an ambiguous narrator who you do figure out as you continue to read, and tells the story of Liesl, who is an orphan growing up amongst World War II, and her family decides to hide a Jew, and she falls in love with reading and books and letters and just her little life. Stunning. The next book. Okay, the next book. I feel like I want to do a little video of the books that I read when I was a teen that I think stand the test of time but need a cover redesign because no one would pick them up now. And this would be included in that, and that is A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. This is very much of its era, as you can see. I don't know if they've done a cover redesign. These are all over secondhand bookshops now, but I haven't seen them in a new shop in a long time. But I think this could very easily have a resurgence. This is a good book. It is a trilogy, and it follows Gemma Doyle, who sees her mother murdered and ends up moving back to the UK, where she enrolls in Spencer's finishing school for girls, I think. Spence Academy. And they all start dabbling in the occult and clickiness and discovering themselves, and it's just absolutely chaos. And I love a story with like kind of unlikable or annoying main characters, and I love all of them in this. It is so dark, so spooky, and just I love this book. I love this book. The next one is again for the kind of seasonal girlies who might struggle with the seasons, and that is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. And I actually don't remember reading this, I just remember loving it. Don't remember what it's about. Oh, for centuries witches have maintained the climate, their power peaking in the season of their birth, but their control is faltering as the atmosphere becomes erratic. And it's just, I think it goes through all the different seasons and follows our main character throughout. And it's beautiful. It's a very healing read, I think, and I think I read it in autumn and absolutely loved it. The next one is also a recent read, and that is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is Criminal Minds for teens. I haven't seen Criminal Minds, but that's what everyone says. It's Criminal Minds for teens, and it is a group of kids who have not special skills in a like fantasy way or a magic way, but just sort of like behavioral skills, and they are recruited by the FBI to solve cold cases. And it was so fun and fast-paced and just awesome. So there's 4 books. I've only read the first one so far, but I can't wait to pick up the next one. And then the next one is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. The writing of Rebecca Ross is just so like deeply romantic without necessarily the romance overtaking the story. This follows Iris and Roman and their little enchanted typewriters that connect to one another, and they form a bond despite they don't know who each other are, and they are workplace rivals. And then there's also a background war. They're journalists, so they end up going onto the front for the journalist covering. I feel like that was a terrible summary, but this is just beautiful. It is a complete duology and stunning. Just, yeah, deeply, deeply romantic. And then the last one is actually my current read, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. I'm not even 100 pages in. I think I'm on page 58. And that is Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and this is just kind of giving the spooky Gothic vibes. I don't really know where this is going yet, but apparently, like, essentially our main character is immune to death and can talk to death, and she is an orphan, but everyone that she's ever been sent to live with has died, and she's now shown up at the Hawthorne estate. So we'll see where this goes, but I'm really enjoying this. This is also a completed trilogy, and I do have the UK covers because I don't like the Canadian covers. I'm so sorry. I did get my mum and dad to bring this back for me from the UK this year, which was my request because I really wanted to read it, but I just don't like the Canadian covers. I do feel like I could structure my recommendation videos slightly better, because I feel like I have a lot to say and then I just never say it, and I give you guys a very quick rundown of the books. I don't know. This was just purely like, here's a little pitch, a couple sentences with vibes for the autumn. So I hope you liked this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books or any books that you would recommend for autumn in the comments down below. I'd love to hear, because I am so ready for the cozy season. I'm so ready. We didn't really have much of a summer this year. It was super dreary, but I'm still ready. I'm ready for my cozy jumpers and the autumnal foliage. I'm excited. Thank you again for watching this video if you made it this far, and again if you want to give this video a like or subscribe if you're so inclined. It does help as I grow my channel. Later this week I think there will be a reading vlog coming out. I do have to kind of like finish that, so we'll see. And then yeah, it's September. What a time. What a time. But yeah, thank you again. I will see you guys in the next one.